And the idea now, as we're really understanding bilinguals, is to sort of eradicate that and to say, you know, let's call this what it is. This is translanguaging. It's purposeful. It's what we do in schools to really make instruction understandable for our students. So translanguaging is the use of the learner's full linguistic repertoire, because new language practices really only emerge in interrelationship with old language practices. Translanguaging can be a pedagogical scaffold, but we don't always want to say that translanguaging is only a temporary crutch to get to English. But the big question, but isn't translanguaging just code switching, right? And you know, I think when we see it happening, when people are switching and alternating between languages, it would look the same, right? But the theoretical understanding behind it is very different. And that's why we're using this language. So code switching really comes out of a fractional or monoglossic view of language, where there are two codes in our body, kind of like the cell phone, right? And you're switching between those two linguistic codes. The word translanguaging really represents what's going on, I think, a little bit more accurately, where we have one linguistic repertoire and we're pulling features from all of our language in order to perform our language. So translanguaging in schools is a teaching tool that helps emergent bilinguals make sense of content and develop language learning in all lessons. It's a way of valuing students' cultures, identities, and bilingualism. And so another example here, this is kindergarten. It's science time, and it's in this particular school, English time. And here the students are measuring plant growth using cubes. And the task then is for students to discuss plant growth in their home language groups, but then to record their findings in their journal in English. That's translanguaging. And the beautiful thing about translanguaging, and the second guide that you have in your packet connects it all to Common Core State Standards. And we can achieve Common Core State Standards through translanguaging. It doesn't say gather information using simple equipment such as non-standard measurement tools in English. It doesn't say explain and infer in English, right? We want to get these concepts, and we as educators, as bilingual educators, as ESL teachers need to think about what language we want students to be working in and what content we want them to be getting. So just continuing to take a look at the layout of these units so that you understand how they can be useful to you in your classroom. We talked about the unit calendar and how that's laid out, and then you did this activity. But then towards the end, you've got a section for the performance task of a particular unit. So maybe turn back to the unit that you've been looking at and see if you can turn to the section that has the performance task, just so you can see how that's laid out and described. There should be a description of the culminating unit task, and we also provide options for teachers and students for how the task can be adapted for different learners. So options for the process and options for the product. So you can see how things are differentiated there. And then the next section is additional resources. And here they provide additional ideas for differentiating and expanding the unit. They include multimedia resources like music and films, videos, art, websites, or apps that could be used with this particular unit, field trip ideas, and supplementary texts. And then what the authors have done is to highlight, with translanguaging in focus, 2 translanguaging strategies taken from the original guide, which you have in the front of your packet, that are especially relevant for each particular unit. It summarizes application of this strategy in this unit and then connects readers to strategy pages that are in part 2 of this guide. And there you'll see explanations and examples of each strategy. So there's a little bit of overlap there with the original translanguaging guide. It's been updated though, and provides translanguaging strategies that are very, very specific to these units. And then part 2, of course, are those translanguaging strategies. Each strategy corresponds to a strategy highlighted in the unit, and they've been modified from the original guide to include an explanation of the strategy, a detailed example for each grade level, illuminating the strategy in action, and then an explanation of how it creates a bridge for Common Core. There certainly were multiple opportunities for the teacher to use a variety of strategies for making the input comprehensible. But today, thinking more specifically about translanguaging, I'd be interested to hear some of your thoughts about where translanguaging might have been helpful.
My question was the context. If you could just speak to, was the teacher even allowed to speak Spanish in that era? Or aren't there certain states where she would be, if somebody walked in the room and she would be disciplined for using Spanish in the classroom? And what context does that then, I mean, I was looking at the role or the reaction, the social emotional reaction. If the kids around you are hearing in society that you're not supposed to be speaking Spanish, no wonder they're making fun of the student who is, because they've been told by the government, you don't use that language. As educators that we need to be taking a political stance for our students, because the way the government is creating laws around testing and things that do put those students at a disadvantage. And we look at a teacher like that who's individually pushing back. But how do we push back as educators against laws that we feel are unfair? We need to, as people in this room who care about that, need to be connected at the political level.
Thank you.